Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Samuel David, and I am your host of the BiblioSophia channel, brought to you by Anathema Publishing. And today's special guest is theologian, folklorist, artist, and photographer Daniel Yates. Hello, Daniel. It's good to see you.
Hello.
There's so much that we could talk about. In fact, there's so much that you and I have already talked about. You have your book Arcanum or Arcanum through Anathema. You were also a contributor to Pillars, an anthology under Anathema's publication title. You've done work for Three Hands Press. You've done work for Atramentus. And it's my understanding that you have a book that's long been in development about the subject of Elphamic witchcraft, and its relation to your identity, your practice, your cosmological worldview. And since that work is still under development, and obviously there are no spoilers that can be shared with our listening and viewing audience, I was wondering if perhaps you could talk about what that practice does not entail.
Mm.
Because we have
Um,
fairies, we have the realm of fairy, we have the good neighbors, we have the Seelie court, we have the unseelie court, and then we have these representations that are derived from the works of Brian Froud and Jim Henson that have taken over the zeitgeist, if you will, that
mm.
surrounds this tradition and aspects of this tradition.
I mean, I don't want to be negative too much, but I've often, whenever I'm asked about my work with Elphame, I've always kind of, so this is why I kind of came up with, off I don't know. I've often come up with the phrase Elphamic Witchcraft to kind of distinguish what it is that I'm working on from, I think, a lot of what else is out there at the moment. Because one of the things that I said, to not be too negative, one of the things I've often felt I've said to people is when I finally release a lot of this work, it's probably going to annoy a lot of people because it kind of cuts against the grain of a lot of what's currently being looked at as the work of Elphame. The reason for that, so kind of the thing that I guess that it's not, the reason around that is that I am kind of going. There is an issue with what I call kind of reverse engineering ritual practice. So this has all come from looking at various folkloric writings in regards to fairy, in regards to Elphame, and from that trying to extract a kind of ritual practice or a theological understanding of what is Elphame and what its residents, denizens are. And I think that's a really, really poor way to do it because regardless, so take anybody's magical practices. If you were off in the woods or in a temple doing a ritual and a person who knew not the first thing about what you do walked along, saw what you were doing, wrote it down, wrote part of it down, something that they saw you doing, and then went away, and 100 years later, somebody comes along collecting stories and says, "Have you got any interesting stories to tell?" And they say, "Oh, well, my great grandpa wrote this thing down. He saw in the woods like someone doing this or that, or this was happening, or he saw these people doing this." And so they collect all these stories. And then a couple of 100 years after that, we come along and start to try and reverse engineer a ritual practice, a magical understanding, a cosmological, theological grasp of what was being seen or observed. No, it doesn't. That's not, well, it's certainly not what I'm doing. The work that I'm doing is trying to focus on experiential engagement with it, as opposed to just trying to extract something by reverse engineering some bizarrely historical documents which are not consistent.
And with your background as a theologian, this
Mm.
obviously is something that falls within your purview, would you say?
Well, yeah, I mean, even down to, say, for example, if you were to witness a Catholic mass and you see the priest at the altar, the various different movements, gestures, and signs that he is making, if you are not from that tradition, and in fact, even many Catholics could sit in the room and not really understand the details of what the priest is doing. But they could write down their observances, and then someone could try, and if you could run this as an experiment and then say to somebody, what do you think they're doing? And I bet you the two are not even remotely related. This person's kind of reverse engineering of what they saw will not match what he's doing. That's not to invalidate the practice that someone who has tried to reverse engineer it is doing, because I'm a firm believer in you can make something new today and it's just as workable, valid, and has as much veracity as something that was done 2,000 years ago, because that's 2,000 years ago. Well, they did the same thing. It was new to them. You know, we have to get past this idea of old and ancient and historicity giving something validity. So we have to get past that. But from my own experiences with dealing with Elfame, it's doing it a disservice when you do that. Coming up with something new is one thing. Stating something as a fact for something when it's not becomes problematic. It's a little bit like going up to a god and saying, "What's your name?" And the god says, "Zeus." And you go, "Sure, I'm going to call you Brian." "No, my name's Zeus." "But I feel like you're a Brian." And no, like, no, like, just no. And that a lot of the stuff I'm seeing feels a little bit like that. It's a lot of projection as opposed to allowing it in, experiencing it and working through it. But this is why the work is taking a long time, because even before I'd started to even mention the word Elphamic witchcraft, there's been over 15 years of work that's been done. I've only just now started the conversation because I'm starting to feel like I'm reaching a stage with this work where it's going to turn its face to the outer world. And I'm trying to do that. So I am trying to, because I know that I've mentioned it to people and some people got a little frustrated. They're like, "Oh, I thought this book was going to be coming out." And it's like, I know that quite often someone says a book's coming out and then like 6 months later, bang, there's a book. Like, this is no, it'll be ready when it's ready. Because one of the difficulties with Elphamic witchcraft is there's an element to it that I refer to as hyperlocality. So Elphame is not this singular place that like, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, that's what it is. Absolutely not even remotely. The hyperlocality of it is so extreme that it's just as hyperlocal as we are. So the work and the practices that I'm developing for me, for here in a Lancashire Valley in northwest England, will not apply to someone who lives even just over the Pennines in Yorkshire. It's going to be slightly different. So one of the things I'm having to focus on with the work is making it accessible and encouraging, kind of providing a means of this person who's reading it, like, engaging with that work in a meaningful way for them. Somebody who's in Utah in the States, their experience of that work is going to be vastly, vastly, vastly different. Vastly different. But so that's become a really tricky part of the writing, is kind of making sure that it's not just here's what works for me, go and figure it out yourself, to give people the toolkit to be able to engage with it properly themselves. And I'm hoping that if that's done correctly, it's going to address another issue that I'm seeing, which is a weird form of kind of nationalism that's rising up within this particular arena, where I'm seeing a lot of people going, like, if in Wales are like, "Oh, these are the particular things here and you're not allowed to touch them," although in Ireland or in Scotland or in France or in Germany, I've seen this kind of strange possessiveness over what they deem their historical Elfame. And I think that what this writing will hopefully do is not try and dismiss that, because it's not about dismissing it. It'll explain it in a way that will ensure you don't need to feel possessive, because a person like a person can't engage with that thing if they're not physically there. So you don't need to say like, you're not allowed to do this. It's like, well, if you move to Wales or you move to Ireland or you move to Lancashire or you move to Yorkshire or Essex or wherever, you can engage with what is there. It's very hyper local. So it's about getting off your bum and doing it, as opposed to just saying, yeah, I'll use the right words and the right names, and it's that kind of nonsense won't fly. It doesn't fly in this work, that's for sure.
So much like the material world has an ethnography in each region, whether that would be a localized region or a national region or a continental region,
Hmm.
the realm of fairy or the realm of the good neighbors or the Seelie court, the unseelie court, whatever you would ascribe or whatever name you would use, it falls under that same sort of
Pretty
paradigm.
much. Yeah,
Correct.
pretty much. I mean, in my work, I don't use any of those words. Intentionally, I've avoided pretty much all the common words for the different categorizations of things. I've just avoided them completely because it's reached the point, and I think an unhealthy point where if you use one of them words, you've got to then dedicate a chunk of your writing to explaining, defending, and all the rest of it. And I've no desire to do that. It's purely experiential work. So it remains relatively nameless because I don't want to project either, because it's so hyperlocal. I know that there's a lot of people who will do the work, but it's difficult if I provide a name for things for them not to use that name. And it's like, no. Like, names will be presented to you. Like, don't project. Allow, don't be calling Zeus Brian. Just don't do it. Like, things have their names and they will tell you. Yeah, and you ask politely. And not just names, places, everything to do with it. So I'm trying to kind of really keep things not generic but open. Which is exactly what I was trying to do with Arcanum. That was the whole point with Arcanum. There was a couple of people who I think grumbled a little bit that there wasn't more writing in that book, and there is a page in the book that explains exactly why there isn't as much writing, because that is then me painting what these images are, and I didn't want to do that. I definitely didn't want to do that. I had a conversation with my mother years ago when she was looking at some of these images, and she's not occult minded. She shouldn't identify as a pagan. She's kind of very pagan spirited, but not practitioner in any kind of way. And she loved kind of engaging with the images and then kind of dashing around on Google and trying to understand certain concepts to try and understand the image. And what cracks me up is she was doing more work than I find most occultists do in researching and trying to understand what was going on. And so when I kind of started to bring all of these things together to kind of put the book together, I had this conundrum with myself of, should I be providing like a brief description of the image to kind of signpost a little bit where the image is going? And my mum went, why would you take that away from people? And I went, she's got a point. Like, some of the images are obvious, some of them are a bit more difficult to get your head around. But nevertheless, it's there to explore. I think I really like, actually, Frata Atcha wrote a review for Arcanum on is it Paralibrum? I think it is. And I really liked it because I feel like he got it. He got it. He kind of like just absorb, just osmosis. Like, don't intellectualize it too much. Like, don't switch the brain off completely, but like, understand there's a limit to your reach before you have to meet it. And it's the same in Elphamic Witchcraft. I want people to, it's a two-way thing.
I think that's something that's ingrained in Western culture, whether that would be in Europe or in the States, Canada, what have you. I think it's something that is ingrained in us because of this notion that symbols cannot speak for themselves. There has to be some accompanying text to extrapolate to basically take the viewer's ability to conceptualize what they're looking at, to comprehend what they're looking at, whether that would be on a subconscious level or a visceral level.
Mm.
I love looking at things that affect me viscerally, but if I'm looking at something that is supposed to affect me viscerally, but the caption speaks to something completely different, I think that it loses the viewer. It
Mm.
loses the individual who is looking at this work of art that's supposed to evoke something about the other or the numinous or the occult.
Well, I work a lot with Andrew Chumbley's work, Azoisha, Dragon Book, and the whole corpus of Sabbatic Witchcraft, Viridarium Umbris. And I find the same thing. So a lot of people pick up Azoisha and they quickly put it back down again because the book does not explain itself. The book is like, I'll meet you halfway. I'll meet you halfway. Well, let's meet here. And a lot of people are not willing to meet halfway. And so they kind of over intellectualize what's going on. Although ironically, with especially with Azoisha, I always tell people I have an unfair disadvantage. I say I have a very unfair disadvantage. And so what's that? Well, first of all, autism helps. Not gonna lie, it helps. But when I had surgery for brain tumor during the recovery phase, I was in this kind of strange, weird kind of semi-torpor of God knows what. And it was a lovely summer. It's what I wrote about in Seeds of Aries. And it was a lovely summer, and I thought I'm gonna try and read a book. I could barely conceptualize anything. My brain was like disengaged. It was strange, and it was mildly terrifying as well because I thought, is this it? Is this what's left? Because there's with any kind of brain surgery, it's there's always risks. You don't know what you're going to come out of on the other side, and so I'm like, is this it? And so I decided I'll try and read a book. So me being me, I didn't pick a simple fiction book to just pass the time. I grab a copy of Azoisha and go out sit in the back garden, and I'm picking up, and I'm like, oh, this I can't read it. My brain's just not putting any of this together. So I put the book down. It was open. I put the book down, and there was an image on the opposing page. And I looked at the image, and in this kind of weird, strange state of mind, I'm looking at this image, and it made sense. I thought, oh, I get it. Like those magic eye pictures. I always like to use this analogy. Those magic eye pictures, we have to kind of like look at it just slightly off or something. I'm not saying that these are magic eye pictures. They're not. But it's a case of you can struggle and struggle and struggle to understand how to look at it, and then all of a sudden you can do it if the 3D image pops out, and then so then when you then do it other ones, it becomes easier. And I kind of looked at it and I grasped the interplay between the sigils and the image and the little lines in the graphs, and I thought, oh, I get it. And so then my singular goal was to kind of hold on to that as the weeks are passing by, and I'm going through recovery, and I'm starting to kind of get my awareness back. I didn't want to lose that dreamy state that my brain was in. So I often consider myself like, I don't recommend autism and brain surgery just to try and understand Azoisha, but it helps. It can help.
So, with regards
Oh.
to your approach in studying Elphamic craft and the various folkloric elements that would inspire or would be instrumental in broadening one's scope and in comprehending what this work would entail, are you also researching other cultures? So, for instance, in parts of the Middle East and throughout Asia, you have the belief in the jinn and their attachment to the land, their attachment to geographical locations and certain regions. Is there an overlap there, or is that something that you are not focusing on within the course of your work and research?
Kind of yes and no. I'm trying to not deep dive a rabbit hole of research into the specific kind of entities and understandings of Elphamic space within other countries, simply because I'm not there. I'm not understanding the limitation. This is kind of lead, again talking about something I'm trying to get into the writing is people's engagement with the space that they are in, because I'm not there. I've had people like where I've been giving advice to them, and I always have to caveat where there's a huge limitation to the advice that I can give, and it has to be very broad reaching. So for example, to give a kind of an analogy, I like to use analogies. I could talk about how a royal family, the King Charles or whatever in the UK works, and how our royal family works and things like that. So that would give you an understanding of our royal family. That doesn't mean I can talk about the royal family in Sweden or the royal family in Thailand. Or what it does then is I can share the notion of royalty or what a royal family is, but then its application in different places is distinctly different. That's for you to figure out. So it's kind of giving people, not just the toolkit, but making them aware that they need to do this, because I am concerned sometimes. I see engagement with various books, and a lot of people I feel are leaning too heavily on the author. And like, tell me what to do, tell me what to do, tell me what to do. And it's like, you need to figure that out for yourself. Here's some information. Here's a kind of guiding start point. You've got to do the work. You've got to engage with it yourself. There has to be an experience of it. I find this when I talk to people about working through the Dragon Book of Essex. A lot of people, they say, I'm going to read the book. And I'm like, sure. But like, reading the book is like 10% of the work. There is so much of the book you won't understand if you're not doing it. You have to go and do it to understand it. You have to, and the work is constantly leading through, so that you'll get to a particular Sabbath, like at Midsummer, and the first thing you're doing is identifying all the previous steps that you've taken. It builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. You're not going to get that through just reading it. So yeah, there has to be an engagement. There has to be a personalized understanding. And with Elphamic Witchcraft, that personalized understanding expands into a localized understanding. You have to understand your locality. The work with spirits of place is a huge, huge, huge element. And I cannot tell you how to do that because they're all very distinctly different. And again, this is why I try to avoid as much as I can certain terminologies that will define what something is, to keep it very open. One thing that I do bring in more than anything in regards to other parts of the world is an understanding of, and how do I even begin to talk about that? An understanding of the natural world that you are in. So there are distinct differences between, say, where I am in northwest England and someone who's in Egypt, literally down to the presence of life itself, the presence of green life, plant life, animal life, and how that is manifest and present in that particular place. And the advice I would give to anyone who's interested in anything like that now is take a look at somewhere like Egypt and how the magic of Egypt presented itself and how the gods of Egypt presented itself. And then go and look at South America and how the magical traditions there present themselves and how the gods there present themselves. And you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. I don't want to color people's perception. Have a look. It doesn't take much to go and read just even a cursory glance at the materials from these two distinctly different, when you think desert and then you think rainforest, the difference is huge on how things present. That's the kind of thing I touch on in the book a little bit. But again, I'm trying to limit that because I don't want to talk to people from other parts of the world telling them what their part of the world is doing. That's for you to I want, if anything, when I finally release this work, I want you to email me and tell me what that part of the world is doing, because I'm really fascinated to know. I'm really, really keen to know how people engage with these things and how things present, because I know they're going to be distinctly different. And in Arcanum, I'm always trying to encourage people to do that with the images. I love it when someone gets in touch and they've looked at an image and they say, is it this? I get a sense of this, this, and this. And I'm like, I've never, ever, ever once said no. I've said, for me, it's this, but I love the fact that it's that for you. And I actually write, I've got a whole document of people's perceptions. I don't put names to it, but it's just a whole, this image has had one person see this, 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 this. Because for me, then it just completely broadens what it is. I don't get to tell you how to look at it. I don't get to tell you what it is. It presents itself. Hence the lack of big descriptions for them and things like that. Because otherwise, unfortunately, many people do. They just they want to be told. And I'm not that. If you want to be told, I'm not the person you want to talk to. For
That
sure.
that unfortunately that unfortunately seems to be the MO for a lot of people within our respective subculture. With that in mind, though, is is the scope of your work going to include any sort of exploratory ritual element that the reader would be able to engage with aside
Oh yeah.
from okay.
So there's ritual in there, because there's I think there's many instances where I can't just write a generic, here's a framework, go figure it out. There has to be examples. They're just always caveated that this example is how I have done it. This is the response, this is the engagement that I have had. This is the journey that I went upon. And that's not to say that this is the journey that you're going to have. That's not to say that this is the response that you're going to have. But here's an example, and here's how you can potentially modify this work to what you need. I've always been, since I can ever remember, the person that challenged these forced kind of ideas on what something should be. Even in my earliest days, working in a circle, and people would say Earth is north and air is east and fire is south, and I'm like, hang on, that dirty great big river right there is in the east. Like, I'm not vibing the air right now, whereas that mountain over here. So I questioned, the locality of things has always been a huge thing for me ever since I was a baby, practically, and so
It almost not to draw focus. It almost reminds me of the order of the invocations to the angels in the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram versus the order of the archangels that are mentioned in the lyrics of Kate Bush's song Lily. Well, I remember reading once where someone was analyzing the lyrics to that song, and they said something to the effect of, well, in order to utilize Kate's version of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, you have to be standing on your ceiling and you have to be facing in this direction. And yeah, I find that humorous in relation to your observation about the direction of the various elements.
like,
Anyway, back to you.
well, incorporating, like, because obviously that is a kind of hyper local, like, adapt and adjust accordingly. And I do think there are a lot of people that do that. There's some people that become really like, no, you have to do it this way. And I'm like, sure, whatever floats your boat. But then there is the bigger scale of things too. Like a lot of the time people make associations in the West to ancestry, to the past, and to things like that. And I'm like, yeah, sure, because think about it. Like, if you want to think big, face west, like, and just like, people, if you look west, and you look way beyond west, as in get out of the atmosphere, you're looking where we've been. The planet's traveling a particular direction in the solar system, and the solar system is traveling in a particular direction through around it. When you factor those into directions, you can see where the overarching ideas come from. But that's the overarching ideas. We then apply a locality to what we're doing, bearing that in mind at all times. So there's layering to this, you know, and that to me, that's far more interesting. It's far more interesting when we kind of explore the work, and through my experiences anyway, at least I don't want to tell anyone else what their experiences should be, but through my own experiences, I've found ritual far more visceral when it's done that way, far more engaging. Especially if, for example, you turn up to a location you've never been to before, and the first thing you're doing is you're weighing the place up. You're assessing, you're walking around, and you're getting a sense of the place and what is there and who is there, and working with that accordingly, because otherwise, again, you're shoehorning things into place, and you're saying, I call upon Brian. We're going to use Brian for this whole conversation. Poor Zeus, he doesn't know what's coming, does he? Is that going to be a thing now? Brian's a hyperstate of Zeus. Oof.
There's going to be a long, drawn out deconstruction of this, I'm sure, in the comments, or perhaps someone's going to share this on Facebook. Let's hope, because I would love to see Brian brought into the Hellenic pantheon.
Shall I call it that? The Book of Brian.
The Book of Brian.
Life of Brian is required viewing.
So you were also a practitioner of sabbatic witchcraft. What is the overlap between sabbatic witchcraft and Elphamic witchcraft?
I think the first thing, really, to point out with sabbatic witchcraft is, my working with sabbatic witchcraft is based off my readings of Andrew Chumbley's work, Daniel Schulke's work, Robert Fitzgerald's work, and it is very much my interpretation of it. And I think that really needs kind of pointing out, because I know that Cultus Sabbati are a specific group of initiates working a specific way. So I never want to claim that what I'm doing is, I think there always has to be that nuance between what they're doing and what everybody else is doing. We're all just kind of making our own way and figuring things out. But with my work with that, they inherently naturally kind of come together. Azawisha, for example, is very much a book of the dream more than anything else, and that state is very much a state that blends into the work of Elphamic witchcraft. It's not that Elphamic witchcraft is a kind of a dream thing like that, but it is. Sabbatic witchcraft serves as a really good precursor to the work of Elphamic witchcraft. It kind of, I think if someone's coming from that background, having worked with that material, they'll find fertile soil in Elphamic witchcraft is the best way I think I can probably put it without spending a long time explaining what I personally do with sabbatic witchcraft. It's not to say you have to have done that, not even remotely, but it's just it does hold hands with each other.
Well, I certainly anticipate the eventual release of your book on Elphamic witchcraft, because
I'm going to release that and then duck and cover, because like I say, it's probably going to annoy a lot of people, so I'm going to be like, there you go, yeet, I'm out of here.
You could just disappear from social media altogether. do one single interview and then vanish.
I'll give you the exclusive then.
I'm going to hold you to it.
Oh.
Let's change track here. You have all of this experience as a writer. You have obviously your background as a theologian, as a folklorist, as a researcher. You have recently taken a different direction with regards to this project that you've you've initiated and it's ongoing, the Occult Library, which is a virtual hub, if you will. I
Mm.
was wondering what was the impetus behind that?
It was very much the very birthing ground of the idea originally came from a book that the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back was a book sale from Troy Books. I had been increasingly for many years, and I started to feel like a single voice amongst many of reeling against the secondhand market of occult books and the state that it's in, and the blatant scalping across the board from individuals and from some bookstores too. There's this crazy, like the whole attitude, and it felt like I couldn't say anything in a public forum. I had said some things criticizing the kind of state of affairs in various book groups, to which you find all of a sudden a huge sycophantic following of fans of said individual or bookstore or whatever would come out of the woodwork and absolutely berate you to death, saying, "How very dare you say something wrong about this person selling a book for £800, which sells everywhere else for 200." The final trigger was seeing a copy of Gemma Gary's Black Toad for sale on Etsy for £110 when it's still available from the publisher for about £20. Now, I am acutely aware that a lot of occult publishers walk a very, very fine line. I think a lot of people don't realize that the amount of effort and the amount of self-sacrifice that it takes for a lot of these publishers to get these books out, they are so dependent upon pre-orders. They're so dependent upon on the sale of those books, and that, you know, that those prices are kept as low as possible for people to then literally practically drop ship. You know, so that they're listing this book for sale on Etsy and then buying it from Troy. And what frustrated me was seeing how many reviews this person had for this sale of this very book. They'd sold multiple copies of it at £110. And they were like, such a wonderful seller. It was packaged so well. And all. I'm like, what the hell? I'd had enough. I'd had enough. So my first attempt at what eventually became the Occult Library was I put together a spreadsheet, and I think this was back in about 2018, I want to say, maybe. I think 2018. I put this spreadsheet together, and it listed all the publishers, and then it listed every book they'd ever produced. And then it was color coded: red, amber, green. Red, it's sold out. Amber, it's forthcoming. Green, go buy it. And there was links. If it was green, you could click it and it would take you to the publisher's website to purchase the book, to try and just combat misinformation about a couple of things. So there's misinformation about people buying books that are being touted as rare, and it's not rare, it's available from the publisher. Another thing that was happening is some publishers release a book that is a really well-made book. It's like a standard hardback, and let's say it has a dust wrapper on it, but underneath the dust wrapper there's this beautiful embossing, and that confuses the hell out of me. I hate dust wrappers. People have often said to me, why do you take all the dust wrappers off your book? Because I hate them. I just don't like them. I hate they slip around when I'm reading. I can't stand the things. I know people get super precious about books in that sense, like, I don't want a fingerprint on it. It's like, I want to read it. So, but what I was seeing as well happening is people were buying a book, taking the dust wrapper off it to show the wonderful embossing underneath, and selling it, saying, this is the deluxe edition. Because a lot of people didn't realize there was that nice embossing underneath. It's crazy. So this was happening as well. So I was trying to kind of highlight editions and said, no, you know, the most common book, bar none, the most common rip-off book that I've seen where people tout it as a deluxe when it's not, is Three Hands Pressed Children of Cain. For some reason, that book is really easy to try and pass off as a deluxe when it's just the standard. And that's a testament to the quality of the books of the standard editions. They're that good that you can tout them as deluxes if you take the cover off. So this was to combat that. The problem was I listed every publisher that I could think of. There's a huge amount. And I realized that one of the things that people were benefiting from with this is not only were they able to find information on the books that they were, they're potentially interested in, they're also discovering new publishers they'd never heard of. And I'm like, this is why I miss bricks and mortar occult bookstores. We used to have one here in Manchester called New Aeon Books, and I miss it so much. When I went down to London to do the signing for Arcanum, I went into Watkins and Treadwell's, and it was the first time I'd been into a physical occult bookstore in about 10 years at least. And I actually got a little bit emotional just to be able to browse shelves, because I thought this is how you found books. Whereas now it's difficult to find new content outside of the publishers you know. It's like, well, where do you go? Where do you find the information? So that was stewing away at the back of the mind all the while I had this spreadsheet running. Interestingly, I did have, and I'm not going to name names, but there was one publisher that went, take our name off that list. I'm like, okay, sure. I had endless amounts of people saying, you forgot this publisher. And I'm like, no, I didn't. They don't want to be on there for some bizarre reason. But anyway, each to their own. So the problem with that format was it was extremely time consuming for me to maintain availability. It would mean me literally going to every page of each of these books. Is it still available? Is it still available? And I thought about asking publishers, could you liaise with me and tell me when a book is then sold out? But I thought, do you know what? They're already swamped out. They're not going to want to do that. So I thought, okay, no. And so the spreadsheet languished. We hit COVID, and I just thought at that point, I'm just going to let it kind of fade away. I can't maintain this. I just can't, not unless I kind of get a whole team of people to help me do it. But I thought I'm still frustrated. I'm still frustrated. And I had all these other ideas, there was people discovering new publishers, that feeling like you get in a bookstore. And I'm like, So I was mulling this over for a while. And then after COVID, I started putting ideas together in my head. And again, just sitting on it, not really acting on it. And then me being me, decided at the very beginning of December, I'm going to launch one on the 1st of January. So I had 4 weeks. So I built that entire site in 4 weeks. I was like, it was that I don't even, if you said to me what happened December 23, I'm like, I haven't a clue. It didn't happen. I didn't sleep. It was insane. Like the amount of time that I had to go into that was literally insane. I was losing the will to live. I was like, oh my days. Well, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. And I had I had a friend helping me with some of the cataloging efforts. But even he was like, what on earth? It's like once you kind of get into it, and part of the reason, and please publishers don't hate me, please don't hate me, but part of the problem and part of another one of the many reasons why I wanted to put the site together is that so many publishers, not all, but so many publishers release a book, and there's a couple of things. So they'll release a book and then there's maybe a deluxe edition of that book, but you'll never get to see the picture of it. So us book voyeur people who maybe can't afford that deluxe edition, but I still want to see what it looked like. We don't get to see them unless someone posts about it on social media. There's no information about it on the website. Another issue is many publishers are not documenting their prices once a book is sold out. So people have no base point to compare to when looking at the secondhand market. If you're late to the party, because one thing I've done for forever is like, please get on publisher mailing lists so that you can get it at the cheapest possible price. So there's no price to compare to. But what is actually happening with a hell of a lot of publishers is once a book is sold out, it's removed from the website as though it never existed. And that's actually a real problem for the community, because then you can't find out information. It's like even me, right? And I have been kind of absorbed into the occult book world for many years. Even me putting together this website, utilizing the strong power of the Wayback Machine, because my God, this website wouldn't exist without the Wayback Machine at this point. Was discovering couple of books from certain publishers that I never knew existed. And I'm like, if I didn't know that book existed, nobody knows that book existed at this point, seriously. So it was very infuriating. So some publishers, I think, do a much, much, much better job than others at kind of cataloging or at least archiving. Here's what we've produced in the past, and so getting them on the site was a lot easier. Some are far more difficult. So that was kind of a craziness of trying to get all this information together. Then there was the issue of putting together images for the books, because there's a distinct copyright issue going on in that, like, all these images are just often from Google searches. Unless if I own the book myself, I'll try and take a picture of it. But otherwise, especially for rarer editions of things, it's books that are usually, I've tried to avoid as best as I can images from bookstores. But sometimes that image from a bookstore got used somewhere else. So I don't know necessarily if it was from a bookstore. So I've had to just kind of put this caveat. We're not trying to outdo you of anything. If this is your image, please tell us. We'll credit you or we'll remove it. It's not a problem. And it's not been a problem really, mostly so far. But yeah. So yeah, it was a crazy December 23 putting all that together. Launched it on January 1st, very nervous, thinking how much demand will there be for this? And it was a passion project regardless. It's like I wanted to do it even if it was just for me. I mean, to be honest, a lot of people tell me off for this. They're like, Dan, you seem to spend a lot of time making things, not just for you, kind of, you're not monetizing things. And it's like, well, I know. Yeah, I just spend a lot of time doing all of these things, but it's like, well, you know what? I've wanted that resource for ages. And what was really, really heartwarming was the sheer volume of people that turned around on launch and said, we have needed this for so long. And I'm like, oh, good, it's not just me then. Oh, so yeah, and from there, January was an insanity because I realized something that I didn't think I was able to do with the website. I could, which meant I had to without getting technical, I had to fundamentally change something about the website, which took me 3 solid weeks of doing. But it's done. So it has been very slow through kind of the last month, half of February and March, because we had some personal tragedies happen kind of out of the blue. And so that kind of threw me a little bit because I've been I feel like it needed to happen for this as well anyway, because I was so hyper focused without getting into the reasonings, but I was so insanely hyper focused that something forcing me to stop and like, okay, was needed in a way. And now I can kind of approach it a bit more stable and steady and kind of work on things. Like there's all sorts of things that I'm wanting to add. The work is never ending. We're at the point now with publishers. A lot of the publishers, like what I guess you could consider the more prominent publishers at the moment, I did those first, not because they're more prominent, but because they were easier. It's easier to kind of catalog these bigger sites. But then at the smaller ones, what we're having to do now is we're reaching out to publishers and saying, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it. Can you provide us with that information? So like, the name of the book, the author, the description, and the image. If you can provide us with that, we can get you on there much, much, much faster. Otherwise, because it's going to take a very long time, because I can't commit the time that I had available in December now. So I can't like December, I was probably doing honestly about 16, 17-hour days, 7 days a week, trying to get the site going. It was crazy. The wife was like, you're going to burn out. I'm like, I know, but I've started now. So, so I'm keen to, so if any publishers are watching this and you get an email from us, help us out. Like, but we're trying to, we've diversified as well. We've recently launched the art galleries. I was so keen to do that because I honestly do feel that a lot of these artists don't get the credit they deserve for some of what's in the books, and they're not getting credit from the publishers. They are. It's and people enjoy the artwork. I don't know, it's this weird space where everybody enjoys it, everyone appreciates it, and yet artists can languish and not really make a vast amount, not make a living off their artwork for sure. And so I'm keen to kind of like put them in front of people and say, you can go buy prints. Here's a link. You can go look at more of their stuff. You can buy a print. Because a lot of people don't realize. I mean, I've done this so many times. It's just off camera up there, right? But there's an image from Martin Duffy's Effigy book. And I was looking through and I saw this image, and it's what's known as a Kern baby. And I was obsessed with that image because I love that element of British folklore. And I was just like, oh. So I literally was rooting out the artist and saying, can I get a print of that, please? And she was absolutely like, yes, 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 yes. And so people don't realize you can find the artist, and if you get in touch and say, please, can I buy your work? They'll absolutely, they will sort you out. Nothing makes an artist happier than when someone roots them out and says, I want to buy your work. I know that not everybody can, like some people's personal circumstances are different. Like my house is an entire gallery at this point because it can be, some people not so much, so I understand that. But so trying to put artists in front of people, but then it kind of kept expanding. So it's like, well, there's documentaries. I want a list of like what people would consider occult movies. So by the way, for anybody watching, if you look at like, every single page, should be every single page, I think at this point, at the bottom, like for the movies page or the TV page or there's a little form at the bottom. If there's a film on there if there's a film that's not on there, rather, you can just fill the form in and tell me. Believe you me, usually within 24 hours, it'll be on the website. To just archive all this, put it all in one place so you're not beholden to these awful websites with loads of advertising. Top 10 occult films or something, which you got to scroll through 50 adverts to each one. And there's lots of forthcoming things as well. We recently added the museums section as well that I'm keen to expand on. So again, if people know of museums that are not listed there, please do tell us, because I want to, again, museums, like people don't visit, these places close. I think I can, I think, announce. I don't want to announce a date. It's a little movable, but it's definitely happening. It's definitely forthcoming. Is that we're going to produce a zine, a small zine for the library. Hoping for it to be quarterly. I'm not sure when the launch will be. My hope is that issue 1 would launch at midsummer, but I don't want to set that in stone. That's the current target, subject to change. The goal of the zine is going to be to strictly tie into the library itself. So kind of to highlight certain things or to expand on certain things that are in the library. The goal is also for it to be small, cheap, and cheerful. I think that the place that I use for printing, they were a little confused because like I'm a big fan of zines, so that was another thing. I had to have a section on periodicals because I love the whole kind of revival of zines and stuff. I love them because you know what? Not everything needs to be a book. Sometimes you've got a quick thing to say, and it just takes an essay or an article to say it. Now you have like one of my favorites is Wyrd. And so a lot of zines are kind of in this format now, A5, and really nice. So I was showing my printer this and saying, that's exactly what I don't want. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, I want the worst zine you can make. So like, what we're going to get, I don't know.
So
We'll
a punk
see.
zine, a punk zine from an underground movement.
Well,
That's
not
what's
so
coming to
bad that
mind.
every time you pick it up, you're wearing half the toner. Not quite that bad, but I remember them. Oh dear. But I've still got somewhere like you pick it up and you pick it up like that because you are wearing it and it doesn't want to come off. Even like 10, 20 years later, it's like, how am I wearing this toner? So yeah, that's something that's forthcoming. We are gonna everything about the website I basically just paid for everything. Again, because I want it's fine, it's a passion project. So regardless of anything, the website's going to be here. That's irrelevant. But that's why I want to keep things like the zine as cheap as possible. It's basically going to cover its costs to make mostly. and then anything that's left over from that, which will be next to nothing, will just go towards renewing everything at the end of the year. And in the spirit of that, the wonderful Sylvia and Tristan, who've done a lot of the illustrations for the website, they've been amazing. They run the Leodrune shop on Etsy, and they make lots of little booklets and things. But I love their particular style of artwork. So when they said they'd do the illustrations for the site and whatnot, I was so chuffed, and I love what they've done. And they've said that it's okay to go ahead. I can switch on at some point. I'm not going to do it just yet, but I can switch on a merch feature. So if you want to get a mug with the Cult Library logo thing on, you can. Little things like that. Which again make next to nothing, but it's just they're going to be things to help try and offset some of the cost, because it started to get a little crazy. Like the things, you have to upgrade if you want to do this with it and that and with it, and it costs X amount of money if you're going to use the email lists and things like that. So, but I mean, regardless of any of that, it's going to run anyway. But because people would say you need to monetize, I'm like, I don't know. I don't like doing it, but so there's the zine that's forthcoming. What else was forthcoming? Oh, there was a few things. We've got lots more. So we have the weekly blog every Monday. This Monday, this previous Monday just gone, is we actually missed this one because there's been so much going on with myself and the guy who's the other Daniel. It's two of us, who writes the blog. He's had some things going on as well, so we don't stress, we can just do next week, that's not a problem. But we do have various interviews coming forward and kind of spotlights on different things about the library. And there's all sorts of things, actually, thinking about it, that's kind of being mulled over. A friend and me are working on an idea of potentially having some kind of map, like interactive map, so you can like kind of explore the way you can kind of zoom in and explore things. You can click on something here. This is where Agape Lodge was. This is where this was. This is where this folklore story is. And just to build that up over time, in part coming from a section of the zine that we're looking at, which is kind of the occult cartographer, of that kind of highlighting a specific place and telling you about it, and then eventually that's going to end up on the map, and then people could just explore, where all these places are.
So a lot of world building along with web development. I love it. I love it.
Teenage role playing me is reveling right now.
So as we come to the end of our time together, what parting words of wisdom would you like to share with viewers and listeners?
Don't be scared to experiment. Don't be scared to experiment. Think outside the box. Break the rules. Break the rules. Keep breaking them. So
Within reason.
break anymore.
Within reason, of course.
Well, in regards to a lot of books, in regards to a lot of books, I'm seeing I don't know. There's too many books coming out that are like, this is how you do it, and I'm like, really? Challenge accepted. And I just try to encourage that mindset in people, that not just to be rebellious for the sake of it, but always apply yourself to what you're doing, as well as take a book as a guide, not as a rule.
Well, Daniel, it has been a pleasure, as always, to interact with you, and I'm glad we finally get a chance to chat face to face. I will definitely put the relevant links in the show notes for this episode, along with where people can find you on social media, most importantly highlighting the Occult Library website, as well as links to your printed publications. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
If you're a new viewer and would like to stay up to date with the latest from BiblioSophia, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for our channel.